looking through this sheer volume of attorneys, of letters from attorneys and responses and counter responses, and just adding that up in my head. And I've worked with a lot of attorneys, and I know how much they cost. It's absolutely incredible. What coming down to what amounts to two neighbors that just can't find a compromise, and compromise is really, I think, a lost art in this country, and something that I would love to see return. And I also need to say Leland is not the innocent victim here at all. You guys did a lot of bad things, and you were slapped on the hand for it. You did go through the process of making that right, and there was a court order to do so. You're now in front of us to essentially get brought up to code so that your pre-existing buildings are, and that's what we're hearing, is that these pre-existing buildings are now to code, and that we inspected that, and we agree. I mean, essentially it's design review, and I think the design is great, and it's allowing for a caretaker's unit, which I see no problem with on the property. Everything to do with the pond and the potential issues that would arise with the pond, that bridge is going to be crossed if and when they do come back in front of us, and we will, of course, delve into that with all of the due diligence that we delved into this. Probably way more than we should have with this, but we will come back and see that again if indeed they do bring it forward. The mitigation, the safety issues that the airport has brought forward, I found a little disingenuous. I'm not sure if it's that they don't understand. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they don't understand exactly what the consequences are, but as I understand it, given expert testimony and of course relying on staff, there's an 8-acre pond and there are birds and they haven't been shut down. If there's an 8-acre pond with lots of birds and zero mitigation, and Caltrans hasn't shut them down, which apparently Caltrans has no right to do anyway, then the idea of them being in jeopardy, their business being in jeopardy, is false and is being presented in a false way. That's the conclusion I've come to based on what the evidence that's been presented. On the other hand, if we were to deny a use permit here for something that's completely within their rights and we've deemed as being acceptable, we're killing a business. I do not see, as Tom Lynch said, why two businesses cannot both extremely valuable businesses to this county. We've heard testimony as such. We have, these wonderful plans and an incredibly tight-knit community, as I understand it, of pilots that are absolutely in love with what they do and in love with the machines that they work on. And then you got fly fishermen who are equally in love with the things that they're doing. That's wonderful. This is all positive stuff, and to have it break down to this is just really, it's kind of sad. So I'll kick it over to you, but I really, in terms of safety, the two issues that were brought up, which were bird strikes, once again, you have an 8-acre pond that hasn't been mitigated and has been found to have really not been a critical issue with Caltrans. Seeing 6 years ago, they asked them to mitigate it. The other thing was the safety of individuals at Leland and the idea of a frog in a blender, which I thought was a little bit of a reach. You look over here and they're following the CALIP. You have to follow the CALIP. It's all about the CALIP. CALIP is allowing for X amount of people outside and inside. And it tells you exactly how many people that is. That's following, that's exactly what's been dictated by Schellville Valley Airport land use compatibility. I just don't see where we're having an issue here. So it's all yours.
Thank you. Well, going third, I don't have to say as much, which is always nice. Without Jason Lyles here, that'll probably cut down a half an hour, so that's good. I would like to start by echoing what Commissioner Lynch said. This is beyond ridiculous what we've gone through, and then once the attorneys got involved, it became absurd. And it's the process. I know it's not necessarily anybody's fault, but when we're talking about the greenhouse gases emitted from airplanes are going to affect the Leland Ranch, and it's just out of control. And we're not going to solve that here today, but I just couldn't let it go without saying that. I mean, it's the hours that we spent reviewing this, and all of these commissioners are very diligent about reading this, and I know I read pretty much every word of this, and though it was very interesting, there are things I do enjoy more than doing this, like fly fishing and riding in airplanes. I would also like to say, though, that I 100% support the airport. I do not want to do anything that would have the airport have to curtail any of their operations. It's a wonderful, and like we were saying, colleague here was saying, they're passionate about aviation. I think that's great. I love people who are passionate about things. And the fly fishermen are passionate, the people in the aviation community are passionate. Let's get that passion together in a room, and this was suggested by more than just me, and I was out there with Commissioner Lyles, and I'm sure everybody said, I think this could be worked out. But that being said, I have no issue with the pond at Leland Ranch. I have no issue with the buildings. I think hopefully they've learned their lesson. In my opinion, there'll be, if there's anything that happens without permits, they'll be on a very, very, very short leash, and they will not get the third chance. This is their second chance. I hope they appreciate that. This commission has been generous, I think, in that, and hopefully they appreciate that. But as far as the pond goes, back to that, in the future, if there comes back to us, I would say that more activity around the pond is better than less activity around the pond. I happen to own, with a couple partners, 142 acres in the valley that we manage as a seasonal wetland. And we have wildlife biologists on board. We're part of the Presley program, which is a state program. And so we're all about how to get waterfowl, how to get other birds on the property. So assuming the opposite would be to try and get rid of them. One of the things that we try and do extensively is have no activity on the property. Birds don't like people. They don't like people waving things in the air. So I think activity isn't a bad thing. And I think you've done everything else to mitigate, and I have no issue with that. I actually, because I must have no life at all, I looked up the wildlife strikes to civil aircraft in the United States from 1990 to 2012. Because I really was concerned about, is this a major problem? And I won't read you all the different tables, but one of them that kind of stuck out for me was that in 2012, there was a total of, according to the FAA, 1,038 strikes by birds to civil airplanes. 225 created damage. And so they're saying per 100,000 movements, and a movement is either a landing or a takeoff, that the chances of a strike are 0.32. So in other words, one bird strike for every 300,000 movements. I can think that's an acceptable risk if it's mitigated properly, and I think this is mitigated properly. As far as the number of people, I mean, it's restricted. I don't think we're going to see 600 people on that property. So I would be happy to entertain some kind, I don't know where we go from here, to be honest with you. I don't think this needs to go back, in my mind, to the ALUC. I don't see them coming up with anything that we don't already know. I don't think there's any new issues. I think they're a wonderful agency, but they're probably going to say the same things we already know here. So a referral back to them, I don't see really serving a purpose other than delaying the process. So I'll let our chair put his 2 cents worth in, and then we can figure out from there.
Well, thank you. This is my district. This is the first district, and the commissioner from that area. So I will make a motion, but before I do that, I have to step down as being commissioner and give it to my heir apparent. A couple of observations. First, I'm very sorry the airport didn't show up here today. And I think they didn't help their cause, and they potentially could have if they'd been here. I wish they were here. Within the context of Sonoma Valley, these are two unique businesses, and Mr. Ward put it well. This is the opportunity here for a mutual win, and I'm sorry that's not going to happen. I know or have met with both the people at the airport and the people at Leland, and they're good people, good businessmen and good businesswomen, I have to assume. They make positive contributions for which other people have noted. These are unique benefits to the greater community, very clearly so. I'm in 100% support of the airport, I'm in 100% support of Leland fly fishing. But apparently it's not made in heaven. I think we can lump the issues in three ways. Compatible land uses, zoning issues. I think those are easy. We solved that some time ago. They're compatible land uses and there are no zoning issues. We're going to cure building violations. A court order involved with this, with design review to become. The process has been drawn out and expensive, and I really trust them in lessons learned. They've been expensive lessons. I also would think if this comes back to us again as violations, we aren't going to be terribly charitable. I think the airport is rightly concerned about air safety, and I'm glad they are. And as they point out, it's both the airport public and the Leland facility public. I see Ben sitting in back there. When we talk about violations, he's the violations man. So, in the end analysis, this is a land use thing. I see as our options going forward really 3 or 4. One is to refer back to ALUC, ask them for a reco. But I guess on advice of council, we really don't need to do that. The second one would be to fill in, order them to ask them to fill in the pond. Declare it a public nuisance or something. I don't know what we could do, but we could figure something out. And I think that's, that's kind of chicken. Or we can move to approve, or we can continue to a certain date. I think what I'm going to recommend or move some way, we'll have to maybe work on the words, is Karen Carnes of the staff report recommends simply that we provide direction and bring it back. I think what we ought to do,
Mr. Chairman?
yeah,
If I may suggest one option for you, you could take a straw vote today, which we're going to ask them to be direction to staff.
Yeah.
Prepare a resolution and conditions with findings, and then have them bring it back at the earliest opportunity for final action.
that's exactly where I was going. Exactly where I was going. But before we do that, we need to review conditions for Karen. And I think, well, let me just try to craft a motion, because I think there may not be 100% agreement here. Move to approve the proposal as written in that staff report. Boy, I should have written it down. No, I think we need to go through the conditions. Maybe when we do that, and that'll smoke out any place we may have some differences. Okay?
Okay, so recap. We've heard comment now from all the commissioners. I think now we're going to try and craft some conditions, a motion with some conditions.
Yeah.
But I think we could do that somewhat informally with conditions at this point. That
Oh,
sound
wait,
good?
absolutely, yeah.
That sound good?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Who would like to start? Commissioner Fogg?
I would.
How about you?
Okay. I got a long list and not in anywhere near of ranked order of importance. In your proposal, you're talking about cultural events. What's the difference between a cultural event and an event? Is there any?
A cultural event is a type of permit that we have in our code that, you know, you go around and get sign off and then you can have that event. Other events, any commercial business that proposes event activities should include that in their use permit statement. So typically we would prohibit cultural events if we don't want them to have those without the use permit analysis that goes with it.
Okay, so you want to do cultural events in it the way it's written?
I don't know, what are you talking about?
In the proposal scope.
Well, in the project description.
Yeah.
I think that the choice for the board is that a cultural event would allow them to apply for a one-time event. If you preclude that, then all the events would have to be covered under the use permit.
Right.
Okay. I think that's fair. So we'll leave it that way. Do we condition against, or do we need to condition against disc plowing on the southern end of 1735?
Apparently that was a major concern for the overrun area. It is better for the airport to have it smooth since they're not really using it. I guess you could advise them not to disc. They do disc that, or they were disking it for fire protect. You know how they usually require that you disc near buildings. So I'm not sure how far that is from their structures or if that's required. I don't know that the fire marshal requires.
Well, why don't we just leave it, the car can check it out and do what's appropriate.
Yeah, they can mow it, I suppose, without
Okay.
disking.
But the main point is you don't want it disked, you don't want it to be a rough surface.
Yeah.
So maybe,
You want to compact it.
yes.
Yeah, you don't want it to be disked up, like you said, like lumpy.
So maybe we could say something that just, so it's a smooth surface in the event of a overrun.
Yeah. Leave it to Karen.
We'll leave it to Karen because she's really good at that kind of stuff.
Do we condition against parking in that overflow area, back and back?
Can we have a condition that indicates that we're not allowing anything to happen back there?
Commissioner Fogg, to add to that, I was going to propose that the fence, there should be more of a permanent fence along that back property line. I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but it's sometimes hard to control. People aren't going to wander, and the fence there is now is one you could easily step over. And as a safety factor, we could put some more, which would preclude them from parking because there wouldn't be any way to get there.
Sounds like
Please,
there's
Karen.
an issue
You
there.
mean parking behind the big pond? Is that what you're saying? There's no way they could get back there with a vehicle. Not that I'm aware of. I mean, basically what you have are little footbridges that lead to that back area back there. And if any fencing that you put in there would be in the RPC, remember that. It has to be frangible. Has
Right.
to be a little tiny thing that breaks apart easily and doesn't compromise, you know, the airplane. So there is a fence that is surrounding the pond itself, so that's something to think about.
So through the chair, I think that it would be good for us to just verify that there should be fencing to prohibit people from going from the pond area into the back part, the RPC area. So we can take a look at that. If they're outside the RPC, they can put in the heavy wooden fence. They can
Yeah, no, I'm comfortable with that. Just, I just want to make sure we don't encourage, or that we discourage enough any kind of foot traffic that should be.
Right.
Either way.
Right, so I think that's a good catch. There isn't really a specific condition about fencing and prohibiting people from wandering.
Well,
Council want to weigh in on this?
Your board could also require some signage that, indicating not to go, no person beyond the fenced area or something.
Yeah, aviation hazard area.
However you want to do it, I mean, just so that not just fencing, it's also
Signage.
signage.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea too.
Okay?
I think it's also worth noting that there's going to be a large magnifying glass on this project from here on out, and it's incumbent on them to, their guests are their responsibility. So if you get, I think it's going to be reported and dealt with.
In fact, my next comment was, Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
we have a 2-year review of compliance on wineries and that sort of thing. Can we put in some kind of compliance review here after 2 years?
Well, technically, this is a design review
There's a seat.
application, but there is a use permit with the caretaker unit. There's not a lot of,
Well,
Yeah,
again,
I mean, with the 2-year review would be reviewing the conditions of approval as of the caretaker unit and not really the overall operation of the property.
however, I would say that complaints filed, as a possible violation of any condition of their design review approval will have use restrictions in a covenant. And I suppose I could
see what you can do.
notice the code enforcement
Okay.
to investigate whether that was in fact.
Well, it would certainly affect the future application of any use permit or change with the property. If there were complaints in the interim, that kind of, I think, encourage them to abide by all the conditions.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it would be better to have a 2-year review associated with an actual use permit.
Mhm.
And if there was a fly fishing instruction or whatever, then you could do that.
So if they ever did apply for outdoor fly fishing and different things as a new use permit, then it would bear how the behavior has been in the interim, and then we could implement a 2-year review on whatever the application is. If
Yeah,
they do that.
it would, yes, I think that's what I'm saying is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is they can file complaints, they would be investigated, and dealt with at that time, but we don't really have a 2-year review on the design.
Understand. I agree.
If there was a serious enough complaint, could it come back to us to discuss? Even, because it's not a use permit, other than for the one.
No, the odd thing about this is without the use permit for instruction, we really are just looking at the design, which, in this case, the landscaping, the building locations, and so it's a little different.
Yeah.
It's more like you have to mitigate by design, That's why we've added the covenant and restriction, because that is a covenant that runs with the land, it is a restriction. Any future owner would have to abide by that. I don't know if you have anything to add about how we can monitor or enforce those.
Debbie doesn't.
Debbie Leland, Deputy County Counsel. There's also a permanent injunction against any operation of the fly fishing school already in place that can also be enforced.
Yeah, so the court can enforce it, yeah, because we do have a permanent injunction against them, or enjoining them from operating as a fly fishing school, unless and until they get a use permit. So they won't be able to have people out there learning how to fly fish under this approval in any respect. So if they are doing that, people, we can enforce it through the courts.
Commissioner Fogg, with that?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay.
My last comment was, I believe somewhere in this mammoth pile was a note from Caltrans about some highway comments that they wanted reflected. Turn lanes and that sort of thing. Is that condition?
That needs to be added to the conditions of approval. There was some discussion of whether or not actually one of the requests that Caltrans had, which is actually narrowing down the existing
The
driveway.
driveway, that's right.
Which I thought was kind of unusual, and so the applicant's attorneys did some research, and provided comment back indicating that the section that Caltrans is referring to is actually has to do with urbanized areas versus rural areas. So that's something that we need to look at and determine whether or not the driveway in fact needs to be narrowed down. As far as doing some improvements on the highway, I'm hearing back from the applicant that they were aware that that was going to be required. And so yes, that definitely needs to be added to the conditions of approval.
Okay, good,
Yeah.
good. Those are my conditions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? Let me just take a quick look here. We still have fish in the pond. How do we feel about fish in the pond? And before I do ask the question, I will say, I believe you got those from Smith's Trout Farm. So those are triploid trout, which are sterile, and they don't live very long. I mean, they do live, I don't know how long they've been around. They're getting long on the tooth. So I'm not sure how long those fish are going to be. Are there? Do you know how many are still in there?
We haven't seen many at all.
Yeah. So even though I brought it up, I just want to make sure we're clear. I don't have an issue with it. I don't think there's enough that are going to. Okay. And I think that I can't read my own handwriting, so that should be it. So we have the conditions. Do we want to have a motion?
Move approval of the request for design review for a fly fishing retail shop and associated structures, and approval for a use permit for a caretaker unit on a 13-plus acre parcel. Period.
On a straw vote.
On a straw vote,
And
and with the
condition.
and with the revised conditions.
And adoption of the mitigated negative declaration.
Okay.
And monitoring program.
And
All right. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Shah Hussaini. Do we have any more discussion? Straw vote?
Shall I just summarize what conditions I've got to make sure
Sure.
we've got them all? So, a condition will be added regarding disking of the runway protection zone to maintain a smooth surface. We'll check with the fire marshal on the requirements. No parking in the RPZ. I don't think it's physically able to get back there, but they could probably park something back there. Permanent fence, adding a permanent fence to limit people from entering the runway protection zone, along with signage to prohibit people from wandering in that area, and the Caltrans highway improvements that were requested by Caltrans.
Yep.
That's what I have,
Along with the regular,
along with all the
all the
other
other conditions.
conditions that were recommended.
That's right.
So we're all comfortable with that?
Yes.
All right. Straw vote?
Okay, so I guess, do you want me to, I guess I could take a roll call.
Yeah, do a roll call.
then we can figure it out later.
Okay, Commissioner Fogg,
Aye.
Commissioner Shah Hussaini,
Aye.
Commissioner Lynch,
Aye.
and Chair Montoya.
Aye.
So let's continue this for final action, because that final action is what triggers the 10-day appeal. This does not automatically go to the board, and it would require an appeal from the date that it's actually decided. Let me get my calendar. So, let's see, are you around
Of course.
in the next, I mean, I don't want you to have a difficult time getting this done. So, let's see, we will prepare this, if we need a couple weeks at least for to issue it. So it looks like the best date for it to come back would probably be December 19th. We have one item on there for use permit and cheese processing facility.
This would come back on the consent calendar. So,
Well, I guess that's true, but the next BZA date is the 21st, so that means that Commissioner Shaw saying you have to come in, you could trade, I guess, with Commissioner Cook is scheduled for that date.
I don't think you can trade on this one.
Is the 21st workable for us?
Okay.
Okay,
Does that work for you?
Which date?
the 21st.
Of November.
Yeah, you're already scheduled to be here, I hope. You know that.
Why, nobody tells me anything.
Okay.
Okay.
So it would be just Commissioner Chastain who wasn't
Yeah.
scheduled. You could come in or you could trade. Okay, so we will continue this to, you'll have to continue to 105, so it can be on consent on November 21st for a final vote.
Yeah. Okay.
So 11/21st.
Are you aware of what we're doing here?
Yes.
Bill?
Yeah. Okay. So,
So the chair should continue it
yeah.
to that date.
Yeah. So what we will do is continue this hearing.
well, no, you'll continue the item for decision for final action to the consent calendar on November 21st.
Okay. Fair enough. That's what I was going to say, but not as articulately. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck for everybody working together.
Can I also add, there's no ex parte communications with any of the commissioners between now and then, no conversations. You can talk to staff, but not to our commissioners.
Anything else?